They just don't make them like that anymore. One of these actors took on 200 Nazis all by himself. One literally came back from the dead. Number 9 on this list survived a plane crash, a ship explosion, and a helicopter crash, and just kept going. This is what real toughness looked like in Golden Age Hollywood. If you want to talk about toughness, Audie Murphy's your guy. Small guy, only 5 feet 5 inches and barely over 100 pounds, rejected by the Army multiple times for being too small. Eventually they let him in, and he basically became the most decorated American soldier in World War II. And here's the craziest moment. In January 1945, Murphy was wounded and outnumbered, and jumped onto a burning tank destroyer, using its machine gun to single-handedly fight off around 200 German soldiers. Did this for almost an hour, directed artillery fire, killed or wounded over 50 enemy troops. Got the Medal of Honor for that. "I never liked being called the most decorated soldier," he once said. "There were so many guys who should have gotten medals and never did. Guys who were killed." When Hollywood wanted to make a movie based on his life, To Hell and Back, they suggested Paul Newman or Tony Curtis. Murphy insisted he do it himself, and that movie was Universal's highest-grossing film for 2 decades. Jack Palance's toughness was no joke. Before acting, he was a bomber pilot in World War II. During training, his plane caught fire. He bailed out, face first, and his parachute barely opened. Slammed into the ground, shattered his face, needed reconstructive surgery. That iconic, intimidating look he had later came from that accident. Palance himself said once, "There are some moments you never get over." That was one of them. Before Hollywood, Palance was a legit boxer. Even knocked out legendary champion Jack Dempsey in a sparring match. 15 wins, only 1 loss. Basically, he was too dangerous for boxing, so he went into acting. On film sets, he didn't exactly hold back either. He once secretly swapped a rubber gun prop for a real one and accidentally knocked Richard Widmark unconscious during filming. Marlon Brando asked him backstage once to demonstrate a boxing move, and Palance broke Brando's nose. At age 77, accepting his Oscar, he casually dropped down and did 21 armed push-ups on stage. Absolutely legendary. Sterling Hayden wasn't just Hollywood tough, he was real-life tough. Before movies, he captained sailing ships by age 22. Real-world grit right there. In World War II, he joined the early CIA and parachuted behind Nazi lines into occupied Yugoslavia, smuggled weapons to resistance fighters, survived behind enemy lines, got decorated with a Silver Star. But Hayden despised Hollywood, seriously hated it. Only acted to pay for his boats. Mid-contract once, he literally sailed away into the South Pacific with his kids to avoid filming. He'd star in classics like Dr. Strangelove or The Godfather, then just vanish for months, sailing the seas. He also publicly admitted some tough mistakes. During the Red Scare, he named names to the House Un-American Activities Committee, regretted it immediately, called himself a rat openly in his autobiography. Brutally honest guy, lived a tough, complicated life, but nobody questioned his authenticity. David Niven was pretty much the definition of class. Charming, funny, played the Pink Panther like nobody else. But the guy was also a total badass. At the very height of his early Hollywood fame, World War II broke out, and Niven instantly dropped everything and rejoined the actual British Army, literally walked off the set of a boring training film by climbing out a window. I'm not kidding. He ended up in a secret commando unit called Phantom, doing recon and sabotage missions behind German lines. It was so secretive, most of his records stayed hidden for decades. Someone asked him once if he ever actually killed anyone, and Niven just said, "I won't talk about it, but I will say I punched a Nazi so hard he fell down a flight of stairs." Clint Walker, huge TV star from Cheyenne, was a giant of a man, 6 feet 6, built like a mountain. Tough, but often beaten up on screen because he constantly fought multiple guys at once or got ambushed. Off-screen, though, he was tougher than anybody realized. In 1971, Walker literally died when he fell off a ski lift and landed chest first on a ski pole, impaled straight through his chest into his heart. Doctors declared him dead at the hospital until one noticed the tiniest sign of life. They operated immediately. The pole missed his heart by millimeters. 6 weeks later, Walker casually walked out of the hospital, went straight back to work. While filming The Night of the Grizzly, he shot a scene with a real trained bear, a grizzly named Samson. The bear swiped too close and nearly took his head off. Crew panicked. Clint just shrugged it off, stood back up and said, "Let's do it again." His stunt double quit on the spot. Lee Marvin was a Marine sniper in World War II. At the brutal Battle of Saipan, machine gun fire hit him multiple times, in the leg, foot, even the ass, but he still crawled through rocks and sand, dragging another wounded Marine to safety. The guy Marvin saved, Robert Leasy, later got the Medal of Honor. Marvin got a Purple Heart and a medical discharge, but later joked to Johnny Carson that boot camp in Hollywood movies was a joke compared to the real-life hell his drill sergeant put him through. And his toughness didn't fade after the war. One night in the 50s, Marvin got so hammered in a Hollywood bar, he started a fight because he thought the bartender looked like Mussolini. Police said he reeked of gasoline and bourbon, arrested him, and a judge later called him a menace. He was banned from that bar for life and bragged about it proudly. Jimmy Stewart didn't just serve in World War II, he went way beyond that. The guy was already a famous actor, had an Oscar in hand, but when war broke out, he insisted on joining the fight for real. Stewart trained as a bomber pilot, flying B-24 missions right over Nazi Germany. He flew 20 of those missions. By the end, he was a full colonel, not honorary, an actual colonel, and after the war ended, he stayed in the Air Force Reserve and eventually made brigadier general. No other Hollywood star ever got that rank. But when Stewart finally came home, he wasn't okay. The war completely broke him. PTSD hit so hard he couldn't even act. He'd shake on set, couldn't sleep. Then Frank Capra offered him It's a Wonderful Life, and Stewart almost refused. You know that scene in the movie where he totally breaks down crying? He wasn't even acting. That was Jimmy Stewart genuinely falling apart on camera. Charles Bronson wasn't just a tough guy actor. He was literally born tough. Grew up dirt poor in a Lithuanian immigrant family, one of 15 kids, no plumbing at home. The guy even wore dresses to school sometimes because that's all they had. By 16, his dad had died, and Bronson was digging coal in the mines just to survive. First paycheck he ever earned, he spent it on pencils so he could teach himself to draw. Acting wasn't some dream of his. After World War II, Bronson drifted through all kinds of random jobs. Gunner on airplanes, artist, ditch digger, until he figured out Hollywood would actually pay him to stand there and look scary. He never liked acting, never smiled in photos, nothing. He once got a fan letter saying, "You look like you'd rather punch people than read lines," and Bronson mailed back a note saying just one word, "Correct." Kirk Douglas didn't even wait for the U.S. to officially draft him. He straight up lied his way into the Navy during World War II, forged documents, fake diploma, everything. While serving aboard a Navy ship, there was an internal explosion so massive it blew the deck wide open. Douglas got thrown clear across the room, knocked unconscious. He didn't even tell people about it until decades later. Douglas himself grew up incredibly poor in Amsterdam, New York. His dad was an illiterate ragman. The family could barely afford food. Douglas did every odd job imaginable, newspapers, janitor, even carnival wrestling matches, just to help his family survive. He forced himself into college, excelled in sports and debate, then went to war, served on anti-submarine patrols, survived explosions and serious injuries. And after all that, he fought his way into Hollywood without any connections. Even off camera, his toughness showed. He survived a helicopter crash that killed 2 people. Later, he suffered a severe stroke, lost his ability to speak, and doctors said he'd never recover. But he did. He forced himself to relearn speech, kept making appearances, kept writing memoirs, inspiring people well into his 90s. Kirk Douglas didn't just act tough, he genuinely was. Christopher Lee wasn't just intimidating because he played Dracula or scary bad guys like Saruman. He was genuinely intimidating in real life. Before he ever stepped onto a film set, he was out there fighting Nazis in World War II. He He volunteered for the Royal Air Force but couldn't fly due to medical issues, so they put him into British Special Forces instead. Lee's missions were classified, but we know he was involved in sabotage and espionage all across Nazi-occupied Europe. After the war, Lee started completely from scratch. No money, no connections. He spent years doing tiny, forgettable roles just to survive, because at 6'5", studios had no clue how to cast him. Then he finally got the role of Dracula in the late 50s and became a star. But Lee didn't just settle into one thing. He constantly challenged himself, played villains in Bond movies, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. He was also fluent in 6 languages, did his own fencing and sword fighting scenes, recorded a heavy metal album at age 88. He never slowed down and never stopped working, right up until his death in 2015 at age 93.